Is going to be a new segment on the taste, again around holidays. Last week and the week before I was promising that we were going to cover celebrating or preparing to celebrate Hanukkah. So last week we covered celebrations, preparation for Christmas. Before that we had Thanksgiving. Now I'm getting some influence on La Vigilia for next week, so I think that might be working its way into the mix of the segments. But today is going to be about preparing for the celebrations of Hanukkah, which is a very interesting time because it goes, I believe it's December 12th, and it's 8 days. So I've got some good people coming in to talk to me, not just about how to prepare for those celebrations, but also the background on Hanukkah and talking about kosher foods and their businesses and the things that are part of the whole Jewish faith and the holidays that go along with Hanukkah. So the guests that I've got today are Rabbi Barry Dolinger, who is from the congregation Beth Sholom over on the east side of Providence. So someone who's going to be an absolute expert and can keep me educated and fill me in and fill all of you in on these preparations, but also the faith and his congregation. I've also got Rabbi, who is the owner of The Grange, and he has two other restaurants that are also in Providence that we're going to speak about as well. But he's got a great vegan restaurant that's certified kosher over on Federal Hill. And then I also have Eric Taylor coming in from the Bottles. So Bottles Wine Shop is a beautiful wine shop. I've worked with them in the past. I was actually in there for a huge wine order that I picked up after an event, so we'll talk about that a little bit. But I'm looking forward to tasting some kosher wines with him and learning about how he selects those as well. So three dynamic people. They'll definitely keep us educated. I'm looking forward to all the conversations with them. And if you saw my joke earlier, yes, it was trying to make a play off of it. I said a rabbi, a vegan restaurant owner, and a wine expert all walk into Go Local Live, and we'll find out what happens next. So with that being said, I'm going to welcome in the rabbi. Rabbi Dolinger, if you can join me, that'd be fantastic. How are you, sir?
So great to see you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us on.
So the rabbi was a great suggestion from a good friend of mine who I have to give a shout out to, Susan de Blasio. Susan has been a friend for, 17, 20 years, something like that, and she was a great resource on coming up with some of these guests for me. So thank you, Susan. I really appreciate that. And Rabbi, you've got a phenomenal background. So before we even get into Hanukkah, I really want to talk about your background and how you came to Providence. You've been here since 11, right? 2011?
2011.
All right, so tell us a little about where you came from and how you got here, because everyone's like, this guy's young, he's great, he's energetic, so I want to hear about it.
Sure. So I came from New York. I went to rabbinical school at Yeshiva University in Washington Heights in Manhattan. I grew up in Long Island, and 2011, when I decided to come here, my wife and I were engaged at the time, interviewing for pulpit jobs, and congregation in Providence sort of struck early. They were early on the interview schedule, and both of us were getting a little sick of Manhattan.
Wow.
Cockroaches, rats, congestion, cost. It's museums and stuff are great, but we're like, let's see where life takes us. And so we came for a weekend to Rhode Island as part of the interview process, and absolutely loved the people. Genuine, quirky, strange and wonderful in all the right ways.
That describes us, yeah.
And so 6 years later now, here we are, and I've been really excited. Just the collaboration here between business, government, profit, nonprofit, all the sectors. And today's sort of an example of that, is sort of what keeps me going with energy. It's inspiring.
And your congregation over there, I understand, has grown over the years as a direct result of you coming and your leadership and your energy, and you have an openness in your congregation about the faith, correct?
Yes. So I think we're an Orthodox congregation, so it's the strictest sort of branch of Judaism. I would say at a time when most congregations are shrinking, ours has basically doubled in size over the last 6 years, and that trend continues. And inclusivity is one of our primary values, not from some kind of artificial perspective. We engaged in, when I came, what I called, and I don't mean this as a political comment, especially given what's going on, but what I called religious tax cuts, which were things to facilitate growth, sort of lower the cost of entry into authentic and sincere religious experience. So a lot of it was tone shift, a lot of it was engaging in programming that spoke to more relevant needs of now as opposed to other times. We view this as authentic, not something artificial, and we've been able to do it proudly and intentionally and seen good results.
Well, congratulations on that. You've built a great congregation over there. You're in a beautiful location on the east side. And one of the great things that I wanted to make sure that I got educated on and help everyone as well. So those that are in the Jewish faith, you love this. I have lots of friends that are not in the Jewish faith that also like the fact of celebrating Hanukkah and the things that come around it and do it. And likewise, I have Jewish friends, I have relatives that are Jewish that still celebrate Christmas, that they love their traditions and such that come with that, mostly around food and wine. So that's where this show comes in. So I wanted to get the rabbi's opinion and thoughts on, first of all, how you get certified kosher. That's one of the big things that's out there for questions, so people know they're going to an authentic location. But also, what Hanukkah means. How is this 8-day celebration? What are its foods? What are its traditions? That kind of thing. So let's kind of segue into that about the 8 days and Hanukkah's overall.
Absolutely. So, so should we start with kosher certification and that sort of thing, or start with Hanukkah?
Let's start with Hanukkah.
Okay.
Because the kosher certification kind of plays under the Hanukkah, I guess, right?
Yeah, so we'll get there. So basically there are two types of holidays in the Jewish religion, more or less. The ones in the Bible and the Torah, and ones that came from later historical occurrences.
Okay.
The ones in the Bible actually tend to be more important in the Jewish religion, and so people often don't realize that for us, Hanukkah is one of the two most minor holidays of the year, Hanukkah and Purim. It happens to come usually around the same time as Christmas,
Right.
and so because Christmas is so important, Hanukkah gets sort of elevated in terms of its importance. That being said, the quick origin of it is pretty interesting. It's a war, not unlike the American Revolution. In the year 175 or so, Seleucid Greek Empire was split into two, Egypt and other parts of the Seleucid Empire, which was in sort of northern Syrian lands, and even took over control of Judea, of Judea, Idoma, the lands that are currently Israel and Jordan and that kind of area. And the Jews who were living there, so they engaged in a Hellenization campaign. They wanted to really erase Jewish religion as a way of sort of stamping out Jewish nationalism to control the territory against Jews who had a rebellious streak in them and sort of wanted sovereignty. They were itching for sovereignty. Many of the camps, there was a pacifist camp, a more militaristic camp in the legislature, and they wanted to sort of stamp it out. So they started forbidding circumcision, which was a big thing for us, and they started forbidding the Jewish calendar, which is the lunar calendar as opposed to a solar calendar, forbidding observances of the Sabbath and of the new moon, that kind of thing, and then eventually even took over the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. It's kind of ironic because it's a hot news topic today.
It's a big topic today,
yeah. So they took over that site and installed various Greek idols and other things there. And so one family, the Hasmonean family, the Maccabees, led a guerrilla-style military revolt against the Seleucid Empire to try and drive them out. And over time was able to capture the hearts of the people, many of whom were sympathetic to the Greeks and many of whom were sympathetic to the rebellious camp of the Jews.
Okay.
And they drove them out about the year 165 or so and rededicated the temple in Jerusalem. And so that's actually what Hanukkah means. It means like inauguration or rededication. It's short for Hanukkah Tabayit, rededication of the temple in Jerusalem. So it's really a celebration of a profound military victory for a sort of ragtag group of religious rebels.
So you mentioned that it's lesser important of the holidays, probably because of all the things you just explained, but it's 8 days.
Yeah, so there are different explanations for that.
Because any holiday for 8 days that I can eat and drink, I'm perfectly happy with. So I'm.
Okay, so if it's okay, I'll give you the real explanation. This is something that even most Jews.
He's gonna ruin my 8 days of drinking and eating.
No, this is there's I don't want to be like Santa Claus isn't real on Go Local Pub. But the truth is most Jews aren't aware, but there's an interesting thing, and so let's give the audience the most informed version of Hanukkah, the highest level. I trust this audience.
I'm still coming back to the eating and drinking.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Okay,
so basically, there are two explanations. The first is the classical historical explanation found in the books of Maccabees, which record those incidents. There are 4 books that are from around the time period that record what happened, and it seems to be that after they took over the temple again, they had missed the 8-day holiday of Sukkot. Earlier that year in the fall because they weren't in control of the temple.
Okay.
And so there was this sort of ad hoc 8-day celebration that occurred as a sort of make-up a little bit for this missed 8-day fall festival that had occurred. And that's sort of the classic explanation. Several hundred years later in the Talmud, groups of rabbis who were not particularly thrilled at the violence, the militaristic message of the Maccabees and were more pacifist, sort of changed the emphasis of the holiday and talked about this miracle of oil. That when they came in, so in the Talmud, but it's a couple of hundred years after the events, they advanced for the first written time a different narrative, which is that they came in, the priests came in after the Greeks were thrown out, and they only found 1 cruse of oil. The oil had to be holy. It couldn't just be any oil, olive oil. Right. And that cruse of oil lasted on the candelabra for 8 days instead of the 1 day that it should have lasted that amount of oil. And as a result, there's this 8-day miracle. They changed the emphasis from the military victory of the Maccabees to the divine providence of God. So that was a religious shift. So it was like basically what really happened is the rabbis came and sort of transformed a military celebration into a religious one.
Okay.
And we sort of have both elements at play in Hanukkah today. This sort of Jewish pride and in some cases Jewish nationalism. It even takes on political overtones, but also a religious sense of light and that kind of
And that's where
theme.
the 8 days of like the illumination come in. So
Exactly.
every holiday, whatever religion you are, always seems to center around food. There seems to be some way that it evolves and it gets there, and I'm very thankful for that, because without that I wouldn't be where I am. So let's get into talking about how that history evolved into where we are today with some of the foods. What are some of, and I don't know again if these follow tradition or they evolved over time, but what are some of the most popular foods during Hanukkah?
Sure. So I would say there are 3 popular foods, but one theme, and that theme is olive oil. Because this miracle happened with olive oil,
Yeah.
there's this Jewish desire to that sort of took up the rabbi's message of let's light a Hanukkah and a candelabra for 8 days. Ideally, it's lit with olive oil. Some people use candles, but the preference is for olive oil because the miracle happened with olive oil.
Got it.
So any foods that have olive oil are great, but there are some that traditionally developed over time. One was in earlier medieval times, there was like a fried grilling cheese. I don't know if you ever, so they would fry a cheese in oil. That's sort of fallen out, although it's recorded in a lot of the sources. I like to get, Narragansett Creamery actually makes a grilling cheese that's kosher. A cheese that you can fry the cheese right up.
Okay.
Over at Eastside Marketplace.
So that's why you see so many things that are fried.
Yeah, so the main traditional foods, if you ask the average Jew on the street what foods go with Hanukkah, they'll name 3. Jelly donuts, sufganiyot in Hebrew, because they're fried.
Yeah.
You'll also get latkes, fried potatoes.
Love them.
Delicious. Applesauce, sour cream are 2 traditional sorts of things. But now you get all kinds of inventive, I know we've had beet latkes. You can sort of, these days, once the foodie craze happened, so latke was an easy palette for that.
And I like that you said foodie craze. So when Rob comes in, we're going to have him talk about a little about what they're going to be doing over there to people to celebrate and prepare for Hanukkah with the food craze of different variations of things that come out. So with all this happening, and we're going to learn about kosher wines at the end, which I'm extremely happy about that as well. So see, this is 8 days that I might have to go visit the rabbi during these 8 days. So we got the fried items that are there. The process, though, which is not just a process for Hanukkah, but it's part of the faith of your kosher foods. How does something become kosher? And I know that this is common every for you, but I want to make sure that I understand it and relate to the guests as well. But what makes a food kosher?
Yeah, so there's a great misconception here, so I thank you for presenting the opportunity to clear it up. The public sort of conception, I think, or misconception is a rabbi blesses the food and somehow it becomes kosher. I don't mean this in an offensive way, but that's not really a notion that is a Jewish notion of blessing food. We make blessings on food when we eat it, but there's no rabbi blessing of food that makes it kosher. Kosher is simply
You'd be really busy.
Well, yeah, there'd be a lot, especially with the volume that some of these places do. No, that's not what it's about. It's about the process of cooking those foods. The Torah lists certain foods that can be eaten and can't be eaten, and that can be eaten together and can't be eaten together. So,
Okay.
For example, milk and meat can't be eaten together. So that's our first thing because of the symbolism. You can't cook a calf in its mother's milk. The symbol is supposed to engender empathy for all living things. And
Okay.
so the idea of cooking a calf in the milk that would have had it grow is not, we're not a vegetarian religion, but the idea is still we should have empathy for all living things, including
that makes
animals we
sense.
eat. And so there's an absolute separation, even of dishes, between milk and meat. So in a kosher restaurant, it's either going to be meat or milk. People's homes, they have different sets of dishes, pots, so double the size cupboard. It's a little complicated.
Okay.
So that's the first issue that comes up in kosher certification. Are you meat or are you milk? If you're meat, you require constant supervision by a mashgiach, a rabbi, or a Jewish supervisor who knows what he or she is doing, just to make sure that the meat is kosher meat, because all meat kind of looks identical. So we need constant eyes on that. And there are very strict rules about the slaughter. It has to be slaughtered in a special way so that it's done extremely quickly by a trained ritual slaughterer who performs a ritual with the blood as a sign of respect for the life of the animal, makes certain blessings on it, and also drains the blood from the animal before doing it. And
It's a lot behind this.
It's a lot, and it has to be a kosher animal too.
So it seems like from the vegan side, and I was kind of having this quick conversation with Rob the other day, is that on the vegan side, it seems like it might be simpler.
It's a lot more simple.
Because he's got 3 great restaurants that are expanding and serving a great clientele, so it seems like it's going to be a lot simpler.
It's so much. So for stuff that isn't meat, once you move into dairy or vegan, it's what we call yotze v'nichnas. You just need supervision that is reliably, regularly there. So you don't need a constant supervisor on staff. You can sort of come and go as long as you know you're working with people and can trust that the ingredients are kosher, which means so there are some ingredients that, because the production is so streamlined, they don't even need kosher certification, and that's a debate within the rabbinic community. But a good example would be olive oil, something that's Hanukkah.
Right.
100% olive oil. So because extra virgin 100% olive oil, there's nothing else in there that could not be kosher. There's no problem. It doesn't need anything. But other products which are processed, a lot of times, kosher keeping Jews in different degrees will look for a label. And there are hundreds of companies that certify.
So kind of talking about that certifying and the label like you just mentioned, I noticed that on the congregation's website that you've got a list.
Yes.
So as a resource guide, and it's very easy to find the congregation's website, if you type Beth Sholom RI and it comes up in 2 seconds. But you had a section that popped right up about kosher foods and places that I'm assuming that you have certified or someone on your team over there. But it wasn't as long as I would have thought. The list that was on there. Probably because this process is a big process.
It's a pretty complicated process, and people are also skeptical because it's been a sort of big corporate industry. This is where my approach is a little different.
Okay.
I don't mean this really to slam my competitors in the field, but just to keep it interesting. A lot of companies charge a lot of money for their kosher supervision because it's how they are making money, and also they're doing it full time. I'm already in the community, and I have a sort of radical view of religion, which is that once clergy have enough to live comfortably, really making more money is not my job, but it is my job to have kosher eateries available. When I came, there was almost nothing here.
Right.
And so I made it my number one. It's something I said on the interview. I promise that within 2 years we will have at least 1 kosher establishment, and if you give me 5 years, we'll have at least 3. And I'm proud to make good on that campaign promise.
You absolutely have. I mean, you got one person that's got 3 alone, right? That's got them. So.
And there's a couple of new ones coming. There's by Chloe. I'm not supervising, but it's going to be at Thayer, near Brown over there. A rabbi in New York, Rabbi Zev Schwartz, who's doing some out-of-town supervision, and then we're doing a pop-up also with Rebel Artist and Bagel on the Sunday of Hanukkah.
Really?
Elena Pagan, and we're going to be doing kosher for a day there on Sunday the 17th.
So Sunday the 17th. So
Yeah.
it's Rebel Bagel.
Yeah.
Sunday the 17th. So we just got some good news for you, so everybody can check that out.
Yeah.
Everybody loves bagels. All right, so we got to make sure I put that out there. Rebel Bagel, give them a good shout out, make sure we do it. So Rabbi, you've given us some phenomenal education. I love the fact that you've got the list on the site. Thank you for clarifying the process, because truthfully, I think there's a lot of misconceptions.
Yeah,
that
there
out
are
there
other
for-
things too,
that
but I
they're
know
out
it's a
there.
limited segment. I wouldn't want people to think it's just that. There are bugs in vegetables we're not allowed to have, and so special washing procedures, it gets sort of complicated.
So now, your personal preparations in preparing this, you've got a great list of places that you've certified. Now I'm sure that you do some cooking at home. The gentlemen that I have coming in next are all people that are very fond of you and spoke very highly of you and appreciate what you've done to the community. So it's got to be heartwarming from that sense that Hanukkah could have its celebrations and its preparations expand, knowing that you got people like my next 2 guests coming in to join us.
Yeah, so I love those guys. If I could just
Of course.
sing their
Go
praises
right
for a
ahead.
minute. So Rob, when I came in, he was a little skeptical. He'd been approached by rabbis before about going kosher, and he's like, I don't know what's involved. It was sort of cold, lukewarm, and I said, well, just let me in the back. Let me look and let me tell you what would need to happen for this to happen. He's like, how much is it gonna cost? So my model's not about the cost, right? So I'm like, it really is not about the money. What do you mean it's not about the money? Who are you? What is this? So I was like, just let me see. And so he did. He let me play in his kitchen a little bit, and from there we sort of moved on. We tried out the wildflower. The relationship sort of grew. We became friends. My wife, his wife, we've sort of all become quite friendly through this process, which is really what food is about, right?
Absolutely,
It's about bringing people together.
Absolutely.
And Rob is just focused on that, and now it's really, I think, part of the mission there is that he really wants to be inclusive and in this way of the Jewish community, and I'm so grateful for his openness to this process. And then Eric bottles has stocked probably the best selection of kosher wine in any state other than New York and the United States. And in addition to that, he buys our bread on Passover. We're not allowed to buy bread. He buys the bread of the entire Jewish community of Rhode Island so that we can use it after Passover. He's become really a friend to the community.
That's awesome.
Not just, this has really been about building bridges and relationships, not just food, but the food's sort of been the excuse to become.
And food's a great excuse. Food and wine are a great excuse for anything, I found.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Rabbi, congratulations to you. Thank you for all that you've done for the community and your congregation. You both, the congregation yourself, have a lot to be proud of. And it's a special holiday, no matter how minor it is, it's still a special holiday that's out there in that regard. And I think that for Christians and Jews to be able to come together and understand each other's holidays and celebrate in different ways is important. So
Yeah,
like you
no.
said, it brings people together.
Absolutely, thank you.
So
It's,
thank you for your time today, Rabbi. Greatly
you.
appreciate you coming in. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
have a great day.
Thank you. So that was a great education, an absolute great education. And I wanted it to be in depth as the rabbi did because there's a lot that myself I don't understand, and I wanted to make sure that I do and appreciate these cultures and stuff that are out there. So I hope whether you are celebrating Hanukkah or not, you can at least have a little part of it and enjoy some of their